Thank you, Caitlin, and thank Ryan and the whole maintenance community for your hospitality. I've been looking forward to this. So let's go ahead, and it looks like in my thing over there, like I'm doing trick-or-treating out here because it's just so dark over here. All right, let's get started. Here's my agenda for today, as I'm going to be spending a little bit of time on viewing RCA as a system and not simply a task. We're going to spend a lot of time deep diving into the analyze part about event reconstruction, and I'm going to be using a tree building tool for that. And at the end, if you're here, I will go ahead and figure out how to send you a link, and that you all can go ahead and get started on doing that yourself with that type of trial. This is the one of our last book out on this particular topic. The reason I bring this up is because I wasn't smart enough to bring up that to make that cover. My father was one of the pioneers in reliability, and in 1972 he set up a research and development group for Reliability Center in a large global chemical company. His first book was called Strive for Excellence, the Reliability Approach, and it was the exact same cover. So this book was a memorial to him, and so we reused his cover from 40 years ago, and as a part of that, we wanted to show that these reliability principles that I'm espousing here are timeless. They're just as relevant today as they were before. All right. Now, I'm suspecting that some of you out there go ahead and you do RCA in the field, and I'm going to give you a little graphic that at least lets you know how I feel when I'm out there. Is that sometimes, you come down the hall and you know the RCA guy, and you're not known for bringing good news. The only time you're there is when something goes wrong. So a lot of times, people will close the doors, you go down the hallway, and they just don't want to see you. So you get treated like this poor penguin here. Okay, contrary to belief, this is our friend Maxine off to the left over here. I believe that everything happens for a reason, and usually the reason is that somebody screwed up. And I would have to say that Maxine represents a prevailing majority of people. When undesirable outcomes occur, they all feel like the way Maxine is, that we'll go ahead and we'll blame somebody and then the problem will go away. I don't subscribe to that. I say contrary to popular belief, the typical human being is not the cause of a bad outcome, but the victim of deficient organizational systems. Most of this presentation is going to focus on the fact that while we deal in the physics of the manufacturing environments, that the people's contribution to that deals with the social sciences and not the physical sciences, and that in order for you to stop these things from happening again, we have to understand why good people made bad decisions. Okay, so let's move on from Maxine here, and let's view RCA as a system. All right, just like any system, there's inputs, there's a transformation, and then there's outputs. In this particular case, we're not going to spend a lot of time because we only have an hour understanding the inputs, but what you do RCA on is extremely important, because if we're doing it on the wrong things and we're not getting the paybacks or the returns for it, then we're spinning our wheels. I'm a huge advocate, although I haven't made much progress in my 30-some years doing this, is that RCA has a negative connotation in the marketplace, because we typically, what triggers us to do RCA are really bad things. Somebody's hurt, somebody's dead, there's a lot of money lost, there's a heavy regulatory fine. Those are all inputs, but there's absolutely no reason we can't do root cause analysis on failure modes and effects analysis, the results of risk assessments. If you took a risk assessment and you did a Pareto split of that, and you found out that 20% of your potential failure modes were causing 80% of your risk, there's absolutely no reason we can't do an RCA on an unacceptable risk. I challenge you to go ahead and try out on that. That's a totally proactive way of doing RCA. All right, let me refer to these RCA as a system here, and you see the long green rectangles, and they're going in sequential order from the top to the bottom. And this is true of any investigative occupation. Number one, you got to preserve the evidence. I mean, what TV show, what crime TV show do we see that you don't have to rope off the area and collect evidence first? We're no different in a manufacturing plant. We're just doing, just like I was showing Caitlin, my hat is a failure scene investigator. This is like CSI, except we're failure scene investigators. So preserving the evidence is key. Ordering the analysis team, making sure that we tamper, we'll never get rid of all the bias, but we can identify and be recognizable about the biases at hand. Then we want to be able to analyze the evidence with those eyes and do a reconstruction, which pretty much we're going to be spending our time in this analyze section. Then when you're done the report, when you're done the analysis, you know, to me, this is 50% of the headache, is that, you know, the analysis part. Now we have to go and do something about it. And that's not always the easy part, is that, you know, we have a bunch of goodwill people, but we also have bureaucracies that, you know, we come up with a report, everybody agrees to, or at least comes to consensus on the recommendations, then they actually have to be done. That's the hard part. And success is not just the fact that we went ahead and we implemented a bunch of recommendations that we said we were going to do. To me, and I'm a big advocate of measuring effectiveness for, you know, good, bad, or evil, is that we have to be able to demonstrate a bottom line performance. Otherwise, people aren't going to jump on board. Say, you know, well, where's my money? If I'm going to spend $1 on this, our average numbers from our books and the case studies is that you should get a 600% return average. For every $1 we spend, we should get another $6 back. Okay, so RCA is not simply that we do a 5 whys, we do a fishbone, but there's an entire system wrapped around it in order for it to be effective. Okay, when I was first made aware of this, I just think that this is, it fits our experience in the field. It's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect, and essentially unskilled and unaware of it, how difficulties in recognizing one's own incompetence lead to inflated self-assessments. Think about this before, you know, for those of us that are in the prime of our careers, you know, we're experienced now and we look back and we reflect. This is where we go in, and this is where you have a confidence. When you just get out of school and you want to get, you know, you want to tear up the world. One of the guys that works for us is a physicist, brilliant guy, but he also trains BMW race car drivers. And he was telling me a story that kind of fit the Dunning-Kruger effect. And he says, you know, if you've ever been on a high performance track, and then you go out and you take your high performance vehicle out there and you've never done it before, you know, you're going to tear it up. You're going to wind it up and you're going to go around them corners until you do it the first time. You say, well, this is really going to be easy. You know, what can I do? I'm only going around the track. Until you try to navigate that first turn, and then you're downshifting, you're using your brakes, and then all of a sudden you spin out. And then you start to realize all of the variables involved with, you know, driving for like NASCAR drivers. You know, whether there's oil on the track, you know, the tire rubbers, whatever the case. So we do that. We tend to do that. I find it a lot in the RCAs, is that we end up, there was a lot of people who were just beginning. They weren't trained properly. They went out there and said, I'm going to do the best that I can. And they said, geez, I got this. And then all of a sudden it didn't work out that way. And then we become a little bit more risk averse. And over our careers, you know, we understand the realities of how difficult that job can be with all the different variables. Holcomb, who works for me, now that he trains other drivers, he says he watches this routine happen every time that he has new drivers come on to take the training and they want to be race car drivers. The authors of this conveniently called this Mount Stupid. Those aren't my words. Is that, you know, that confidence without skill starts out as Mount Stupid, and then the more we have experience in our years, we go ahead and we find out that this is a little more difficult than I thought in the beginning. All right, let's talk about analyzing events, reconstruction. I'm going to ask Caitlin to go ahead and put a poll up. And I want, as an analyst, my preferred RCA tool is blank. I'd like all of you, that should be front and center on your screen. And I know that you probably may use one or two. That's why I use the word preferred. Can you go ahead and just pick one, pick one that is dominant for you, that is preferred by you at your workplace. We're going to take a couple of seconds. It's either the fishbone diagram, often referred to as Ishikawa, a cause and effect type tree, and it doesn't matter to me as long as the graphical expression is cause and effect related with multiple paths to failure, and a 5Y analysis. And of course, there are many others out there, but those are the three primary that we see in the field. All right, how are the numbers looking here so far, Caitlin?
We've gotten lots of votes. So right now the winner is a 5Ys analysis. We have 19 votes for that. Then a close-ish second is a causal and effect type tree. We have 29% of the vote there. Coming in third place is fishbone diagram. And then 2 people said other. I would love to hear from the others in chat, you know, what you use.
Is it possible to show those results to everybody, or is that?
I have to end the poll and then I can show it to everybody.
Okay, let's go ahead and end the poll. It was, and we will see.
Great. So I pressed.
All right.
So you should be able to see it.
So fishbone, you got 21%. Cause and effect, you got 28%. 5Ys, 47%, and other. Forgive me while I write this, because one thing that goes with you is your memory. Okay, thank you for doing that. And I want to show you a poll that I did on LinkedIn, and let's see how it compares to that. On the LinkedIn poll, the predominant one was a cause and effect tree, which is interesting because 5Ys came in second here, and it came in first in this one. And then in both cases, fishbone was third and other was fourth. All right, so the only disparity here was between cause and effect type tree and the 5Ys, but they were relatively close. Okay. So when we talk about RCA and these different tools, are they all equal? Would you get the same result using both of them or all 3 of them in the same? Should we? Well, let's go ahead and let's put that to the test. All right, the 5Ys, often called Ishikawa diagram. It is the cons of it for me. I don't, and if anybody has listened or read my writing or listened to my presentations, I do not consider 5Ys as a legitimate root cause analysis tool. I find value in it, but not for serious events. If I have serious events, most of the time what's going to happen is that we're going to have parallel paths of failure that come together. They converge at some point, and I'm not able to express that with linear logic like the 5Ys. I find the questioning of why to be very limiting, and it narrows the possibilities. It insinuates we want a single answer and want somebody's opinion. And I think that it gives the impression that you're concluding with one root cause. Been doing this a long time, and I've hundreds, if not thousands, of RCAs, and I've never had one that ends in one root cause. And I'm going to test that in the rest of this presentation. Okay, the fishbone diagram typically represents the spine of the fish, represents the time sequence. The head of the fish would represent the problem statement. And then you have your fish bones. And your fish bones represent cause categories. Typically, a fishbone is not known for being a cause and effect technique. It is a representative of what we call categorical RCA. And while I have up here only the 4 M's, the more popular version of this is going to be the 6 M's. But what they are is they're cause categories. And then people that are prone to use the fishbone diagram will have to brainstorm within those categories, say, well, you know, what under the umbrella of machines could have played a role in this particular undesirable outcome. Okay, and then we come to this thing called a logic tree, which I obviously favor the cause and effect trees. And this is reconstruction based on cause and effect relationships. As I'm going to show you, I'm going to advocate that there's a big difference in asking the question, how could versus why. Just ask yourself that. Say, what's the difference between how can a crime occur and why a crime occurred? And you'll get very different answers. So I'm going to go through this logic tree, and we're going to be reiterative, asking how could in the physical science world where all the broken parts are. And eventually we're going to get to a human. We're going to get to a decision maker, and that decision maker is going to have an error of omission or commission. They either forgot to do something or they were supposed to do it and they didn't. Okay. So then underneath the human, we're going to when we get to the human, I don't really care how a human could do it. There'd be infinite possibilities to that. On that day, that person at that time, I want to know why they thought it was the right thing to do. And that's going to uncover these things called latent root causes. Okay. All right. I need you, and it doesn't matter to me where any of you work, because RCA to me is human-centric. It's not specific to any industry. It's not something that you just do at work. It's something that it's the way you solve problems no matter where you're at. It's an extremely transferable skill. If you wanted to move from O&G, oil and gas, into paper or steel or commercial services, the same skill applies. So here where I'm saying, what is the germination of a failure? Well, I'm going to start from the bottom and I'm going to move up. We call these our cultural norms and system failures, but they're not always perfect. Matter of fact, they're hardly ever perfect. What are our organizational systems? Well, we know them to be our policies and procedures. We know that to be human performance factors and human factors. They're two different things. Our communication systems, things that are put in place to help us communicate more efficiently with each other and with our machines. Our technology systems. When we implement new technologies, are we also beefing up the policies and procedures? Are we training the right people that are going to operate or fix and maintain these? Our training systems. Are they always up to speed, and that, you know, everything that we need in the field, that the people are qualified and their skills are kept up to date on an annual basis? And the last one here is it's like a pet project or a pet peeve of mine, is that management oversight and enforcement. Because not only is it that we have deficiencies in the systems, but we also have to say, well, if there are these deficiencies, shouldn't we be picking them up? If somebody's in the field and they're not qualified to be doing the job they're doing, that's not only their fault, but it's also, we have to understand, well, why is that being permitted? Where on the other side of the spectrum we should be picking that up. There should be checks and balances. All right, so all of these systems are not always perfect. So what they do is that they feed information into these decision makers. And keep in mind, at this point, you can't see human reasoning. It goes on in somebody's head, but we can't see it. So it's still invisible to us. However, when that human goes ahead and says, well, now I'm going to make a decision, that's triggering something to happen. So this is going to cause a series of cause and effect relationships that are observable in the physical world that we can go ahead and see. If we don't break these chains, then eventually I'm going to have an undesirable outcome. Now, what does an undesirable outcome mean? It depends on where you work. because every one of you probably has triggers in your organization that would say, once this threshold has been met, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do an RCA. So right here between these chain links here and that blue box at the top, this is where if we break the chain, we call those near misses. And if we are astute enough to have near misses with severe consequences, with potentially severe consequences, it often becomes a choice as to whether we do an RCA or not. And I'm going to tell you that I find in a lot of industries, and I've been doing this in hospitals too for about 20 years now, is that when it becomes a choice and you've got a whole bunch of other things on your plate and you don't have to do RCA, it's a time-consuming task, then we're not going to do it. And my challenge to you is think about it. If you were lucky, and the near miss to me is that you just got lucky, is that if you break this chain and you don't analyze how it got that far, then this sequence of things is going to happen again. Okay, so that's why we should be doing RCAs on near misses. It's another proactive use of RCA. So we refer to all of these organizational system things as latent root causes because they're always there, but they have to be triggered. I mean, most of these can only hurt you. You might get a paper cut because they're paper. But the human being is what has to activate these latent roots. And the human roots, it's probably not even a good word for that because it's identifying a decision error. That's all. Somebody made a choice to do something. As a result of that choice, the physical root causes are now going to be observable. And this is dealing with the consequences of that decision. Okay, I want to put an idea in your mind right now, and I wanted to make it look like an hourglass, which I've tried to do here with using my triangles. But I want you to see that the human decision making, the human involvement in these processes, that everything above the human from the decision forward deals with the physical world, the physical sciences. Everything beneath it deals with their rationale or their reasoning of why it was the right decision. So over here we say these are the physics of failure, and a lot of people refer to this as hard engineering. And then when you come over to the social sciences, the human side, those are what's referred to as the soft side of engineering. And I want to make a point here at the what I just showed you there, the decision outcome and the decision intent. It's really interesting when you follow safety research and the researchers and the academics, but it makes perfect sense, is that we tend to judge other people's decisions based on the outcome of the decision. Okay, if something bad goes wrong, I can't believe they did that. That was really stupid. I would have never done that. Whereas when people judge us, we prefer to be judged based on the intent of our decision. And that's really what an RCA is about. An RCA is not about using it to find who made the bad decision. The RCA is about finding the intent of that decision maker so that you can uncover those systemic things that were occurring in their minds. Okay. All right, I want to go through a couple of definitions here, but I'm going to use the definition that I use and that we have used in our books. And I'm going to tell you up front, it looks very intimidating engineering language, but I'm going to explain it in the end here. What I define as RCA is the establishing of logically complete, evidence-based, tightly coupled chains of factors from the least acceptable consequences to the deepest underlying causes. Now that's a mouthful, so bear with me. Okay, now this is a typical abbreviated logic tree construction. You'll see the timeline is kind of rolling backwards all the way over there to the left. Now, what do I mean by logically complete? Remember before I was describing this to you, this is the difference between asking the question, how could and why. When we're dealing in the physical world, asking how could is appropriate because of the different physical possibilities that could have contributed to the bad outcome. Versus why is when we get down into the human side of this, is that there's a different set of answers coming from that than the how coulds. Makes a big difference. Okay, oops. Evidence-based. This simply means that if you're doing an RCA where a valid form of evidence is hearsay, it's going to happen again. You're not going to use that in court, and you shouldn't be using that in something that is legitimately an effective RCA, is that you have to use hard evidence. I know some people are more credible than others. If that's the case, then there should be some other forms of data like reports and things that will back that up. Okay, so this just simply means that when we come up with hypotheses, we're going to prove it. All right, tightly coupled simply are fancy words for the difference between categorical RCA and cause and effect. Tightly coupled just means from level to level on this logic tree, we're going backwards in short increments of time, and we're going to go ahead and use evidence to back up what's true and what's not. And what's true, we're going to just keep drilling down. Alrighty. Okay, now this is just another graphical depiction of the same thing. But if you think about all those CSI shows, you got the New Yorks, you got the, what are the other ones? I went blank on those. I know there's a lot of different CSI ones. I'm sure it's Chicago or somewhere like that. But their job is not to find out the who. Their job is to find out the hows. Okay? So when we are dealing in the physical world, we're drilling down. When we get to the intent of decision making, those are the whys. And all of us have seen this all over LinkedIn, but you see any similarities between this and the iceberg? Is that, you know, the iceberg is what we can see, and above the ground is what we can see with the tree. Underneath it is the roots, and underneath the iceberg is the rest of the stuff we can't see. Good analogies for each other. Okay. All right, then I want to go ahead and relate RCA to defect elimination as well. My good friends Michelle Leday Henley and George Mahoney at Merck they carry the flag for defect elimination, and the definition of that is going to be anything that erodes value, reduces production, compromises environmental health and safety, or creates waste. Remember that thing that I showed about the RCA being a system and not a task? All this is just saying that if any of these happen, these are inputs into the system. So we can identify the undesirable outcomes that meet these requirements, and they go ahead and we're going to do an RCA on them, or many RCAs. Okay, and I've known Michelle and her family for a very long time, and it's not a coincidence here that her name is Leday, as this is Winston's book. Don't just fix it, improve it. It's sort of like the Bible for defect elimination. Again, highly recommended. Okay, I've talked enough about the theory, so let's go ahead and let's actually do something. All right, I've told you about events and failure modes. The only thing that I want to tell you and describe, how do you characterize an event? It's an undesirable outcome, and it's typically the reason that you care. Just use that as the simplistic way to understand that. The failure modes are going to be the reasons, that the immediate reasons in which that event occurred. Okay, what would be the event if we had a critical pump failure? And I do want to go out to the chat for that and say, if we had a critical pump failure, what would be the characterization of the event? What are we hearing? Let's see.
We've got pump failed.
Okay, pump failed.
Flow stopped.
Flow stopped.
No production.
Okay, now we're getting, what I wanted to get here is that I don't think, I'll challenge you, and I say, I don't think we do RCAs on the incident itself. I think we do RCAs, not on the incident, but I think we do RCAs on the consequences. Because if I had a critical pump fail and I didn't lose production with whoever came up with that, then nobody would, it would not be as high a priority. So if you want to get the leadership's attention, that event should correlate to some type of business level, because that's going to get their interest. They don't care about a bearing failing. They don't care about the pump. But if you lost 4 hours of production, they care. And that production equated to how many dollars per hour. They care. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through this and follow the logic that is, if this was a failure from your experience, I'm going to say that the reason that they cared is because we had unexpected downtime due to a certain pump failing. And the modes are going to be, just consider the event and the modes. We call these the top box. Everything in here has to be a fact. And put this graphic in your mind like I had earlier, and say there's a big rectangle around all of these. That ends up being the crime scene tape. Everything in there is true. I just don't know why it's true. Okay. So now we started getting away. This is factual, and now we have to become hypothetical. And I've told you, as we've been describing a logic tree, that the questioning would start, how could a bearing fail? Now you're going to think that this is really crazy, this is really weird, but what I want you to be able to do is to visualize being the bearing. I want you to say, I just failed, and what happened to me going backwards, small increments of time. I want to be going backwards and say, what happened to me? And I want to ask you now, if I was to ask you, how could a bearing fail? What would be the things that you would give me?
Would you like me to read it out, Bob?
Yes, please.
Inadequate lubrication.
Inadequate lubrication.
Overheated.
Hold a second. Forgot I got to use this one. Okay, overheated.
Misalignment. Someone said, I was too weak for the job.
Probably somebody I know.
High vibration. Installation. So probably, yeah, incorrect installation. Overloading. It's a defective bearing. I'm a defective bearing. Bad design.
Excellent. Is that about it?
I'm trying to see if I missed any different ones. So we have, oh, they're coming in. So we have foreign object intrusion to pump. We have seal failed. And let's do, there's many ones, and I'm sorry if I didn't say yours. It was not because I didn't agree. I just didn't get to it in time. So we have erosion.
All right. The point I want to make with this is none of these are wrong. All of these are possibilities. And when we're going through the RCA and we're going backwards in those small increments of time, what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to end up using most of these depending on the path that I go. All right, I'm going to say that these are the basics. I know I got a bunch of mechanical people out here, but the basic setup of the process is going to be that I have to have a driver and then I have to have the driven. I got a motor driving the pump. And within that, you can see the locations of the bearings, and you see a bearing off to the right side. So I'm looking at how can that bearing fail. All right, I'm going to give a metallurgy 101 education here. And what I want you to realize is that when I've spent a lot of time, because I want to give the tradespeople an appreciation for what metallurgists do for a living. The trades are usually the first ones to the crime scene, and you know that they're the ones who can preserve the parts so that they can be staged for the metallurgist to see. But oftentimes production pressures and the trade-offs with that is that as part of the cleanup operation, that those parts are going to be thrown away. That's like going to the crime scene and there's a dumpster next door and we just throw all the stuff out there and cut the lawn. You know, we've thrown it all away. There's only 4 ways in which a component can fail. Okay, and this is true of whether it's fasteners, gears, bearings, shafts, whatever. One of them is erosion. And erosion, in its most simplistic terms, is going to be when metals are rubbing against each other and then you're starting to have a loss of metal, okay? Then you have corrosion. Well, at least I don't know if everybody else has this, but with my tools, when I leave them outside, which I shouldn't, so they're going to corrode. It's an electrical phenomenon evidenced by pitting. Okay, again, it's a form of a loss of metal. Fatigue. Fatigue is a cyclic failure where you're constantly going back and forth. Think if you have a paper clip and you just keep doing this to it, eventually it's going to fatigue and it's going to crack. And you can see, it's almost like reading the big redwoods and how old that they are, but all of these striations, they're what they call beach marks, are very indicative. This is a classic case of fatigue. And then this area up here where it broke off is going to be where it couldn't take it anymore. So that becomes the final fracture zone, and that's an overload. So there's characteristics on this of both fatigue and overload. And then when you have a pure overload, you have an instantaneous fracture. There was an impact of some sort where it just snapped that particular part. Now I want to be able to show you in a small table like that how material failure occurs. It either is from material loss or the material is overpowered. Erosion and wear and erosion and corrosion are going to be forms of metal loss. Material being overpowered is going to be from fatigue and overload. So now when we teach people these kind of things, what we want them to do is have an appreciation, even where they take an interest in the field, to make the call themselves. They want to say, you know, that failure surface I know has a story now. Maybe I'm going to make a call on this one. I think it's fatigue, and I want to see if the materials guy or the metallurgist I want to see if I was right. So they take an interest in it. Okay. I just finished this book, Decoding Mechanical Failures, and I chose to include it here because the graphics in it were awesome. I mean, this is high gloss, 4-color, high res, and you know, if the book was just the pictures along with the notations that were made on it, you could use that in the field immensely for the folks who want to make a reference to an actual failed part. Okay, and that's Shane Turcott, and I've only had one conversation with him, but he's an awesome metallurgist, and rarely do I see them write in layman's terms. And this book was you know, down to a level that I could understand at least. Okay, So now what I want to be able to do is I want to go in and I'm going to say, how can I have a bearing fail? I'm going to get out of here. Bear with me. I'm going to go to one of the 200 things I have open here. Okay. So now I'm going to say unexpected downtime due to P235 failure. Shaft failure has occurred in the past, a motor failure, and in our example, we said a bearing failure. And in our bearing failure, we said, how could a bearing fail? And there were the 4 things that we just went over. I'm going to put my eye back on here. Okay. So now, as part of the RCA system, we have to back up what we say. We can't just let hearsay fly as fact. So in these, we have to say erosion, corrosion, fatigue, and overload. If I was at your place, how would we prove that these were true or not? What would be the, I'm going to open up one here that's going to have a verification on it. And I have to do a test of some kind. What would you do at your place to determine whether it was fatigue or any of these other failure mechanisms? If I could get some answers on the chat.
Microscope inspection.
Okay.
Oil analysis. Thank you, David. Kimberly says, analyze the bearing pathway.
What else?
Oh, I'll slow down, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Material testing. Condition monitoring. Metallography.
Many people didn't realize that was a word. It is.
I just was like, I hope I can say this word.
Okay. What I want to be able to show you is that, remember on the one thing that I said that the failure definition or RCA definition of mine, and one of them was the evidence that we had to prove all the hypotheses. Well, this is where, you know, the difference, this was called root cause versus shallow cause. If you're only using hearsay, then you're leaning towards the shallow cause side. So over here, this is going to be that we're saying we're going to have someone look at this if they need a microscope or a trained eye. It's going to be a verification record. I'm going to assign myself to do it. And I'm going to have it done by a certain day. So there's accountability. So I'm going to add that task. And then I'm going to come over here and say, well, I know the people that I'm going to present this to are going to be interested in having pictures because everybody likes pictures. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attach this picture. And you can see now this goes into the evidence for this particular record. And you can see a paper clip there because what we want this tree to be is visually digestible so that when we're presenting this to the powers that be, that they can see that we checked these things. Some were true, some were not. Now I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say, well, you'll notice this dotted line around the edges changes because it was a hypothesis before, but now I said I have evidence. So now a solid line means it's either true or not true with evidence. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, well, that wasn't true. That wasn't true. And that wasn't true. Okay. Now we get to the point here and we're going down what's true. So now we have to ask the question, how could I have fatigue of a bearing that results in unexpected downtime? Now, I'm going to probably act like I'm wishy-washy on this, and probably to a degree that I am, is that sometimes in the field, I'm an advocate that no matter that the greatest learning that comes from a team is asking these questions, how could and why. I think it was Eli Goldratt in The Goal, who wrote The Goal. He said that an expert is not somebody who gives you the answer. It's someone who asks you the right questions. And I think as a facilitator of RCA, that when I ask those questions, people have to derive those conclusions in their own mind, as opposed to me giving them an answer and then they didn't have to think of it. But sometimes in the field, we just don't have the resources, the SMEs, the subject matter experts that we need in order to give us those possibilities. So I'm going to advocate here, as I do in the training, exhaust the answers from your team first, and then go to do things like, you'll see this on the left toolbar over here. This says Analysis Assistant. Okay. This is an aggregation of thousands of cause and effect relationships from, us doing this for so long. It's to help the extra capacity of the team by thinking of things that they may not have thought of. So you'll notice that it's not lit now, but if I go to erosion and I click on this, these are all the ways that we can have erosion. These are all the ways I can have corrosion, overload, and fatigue. So I'm gonna hang with fatigue here, and I'm gonna go with high vibration. I'm gonna go in there and say, well, how can I prove whether I had high vibration or not? I'm gonna go back to our PPM, predictive maintenance records. And I'm gonna say, yes, we have demonstrated a high vibration trend. And then I say, well, how can I have high vibration? Well, I can have misalignment, looseness, unbalance, and resonance. So now I need to go ahead and get a evidence for all of these, okay? For the sake of time, I'm going to say this is not true. This is not true. This is not true. But misalignment is true. One way, I guess I've just learned it over the years, but when you want to see whether misalignment is correct or not, there's certifications that were made after the fact that we should have validated it was accurate. But if somebody doesn't align properly when you're watching, probably a good chance that they don't know how to do it. Because if I'm getting my check from this company that feeds my family, if you're watching and I know how to do it, I'm going to do it. So that leads us to believe that this person is not qualified to be in that position. But I'm not, at this point, again, we're not looking to blame anybody. I want to know why that person that day chose to align that way. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, LTA is a acronym for less than adequate. So they had less than adequate training. We're going to say that typically they were the helper for somebody else. That person retired. They were doing a little bit of OJT. Over the years, OJT, we get a little, we take shortcuts. We learn how to do things more efficiently, at least in our own minds. We had less than adequate alignment tools to do the job right. And I'm going to say less than adequate management oversight. I have a pet peeve with this, especially in hospitals, is that I'm not going to blame the person that's doing the job that's not qualified. How did they get in there? If I'm managerial oversight, shouldn't I recognize when someone's not qualified to be in the job so that I permitted that to happen? Because I think that that's hypocrisy when we go ahead and we discipline people who didn't do it right at that time because they weren't qualified when they might have been in that job a year. And then all of a sudden they were probably getting pats on the back for stepping in and stepping up. But then you go ahead and the one time it fails, now they're going to turn on you and they're going to discipline you. So from this standpoint, you remember the root system that I was telling you about. It's always easiest to find the human, the decision. The person chose to align this way. So I'm going to go ahead and label that as a human root. The first observable consequence of that decision above it is going to be the physical root. Okay, remember our hourglass. Above it was this, was the physics we can see. Below it is going to be what we were referring to as systemic stuff. This one is going to be systemic again. Okay, so now imagine that you're presenting this to the bosses, and now you're showing that the red stuff was the systems that were not up to par. They influenced the decision of this person. As a result of that, the person made a decision, and it triggered this cause and effect series of things to happen until we had this unexpected event. And you know, we can even go in here now, and now we want to be able to go in and say that I want to put a corrective action on here, and I want to put a corrective action here. Okay, I don't know if I'll worry about that later. I was supposed to, I even got a note here. Tell you how bad my memory is. I had a note that was telling me to go ahead and send you the viewer link. If you take the URL out of this particular analysis, I can send that to all of you. And if you were using a double screen, then you as a viewer could see everything that was going on your machine here as part of the collaboration of doing an RCA. In COVID times, collaboration is going to be key, okay? Because you know, obviously times have changed, travel's been cut, so we have to be able to move forward. Caitlin, did you have a question?
Yeah, would it work if you added it to the chat right now? Would it be clickable?
Can't hurt to check. Let's see.
Bear with us, everyone. We're going to do some live experimentation.
Now, could you see that on your side, Caitlin?
I have clicked. It's loading analysis, and I can see it.
So now in real time, she can see anything, or any of you can see anything that I'm doing in here. And if there was another licensee, you know, there's viewers and there's doers. So viewers can see without touching. So this would be like your boss. You want your boss to look at it, but you don't want your boss to change it. So you just give them a view link. But say you had a peer who worked at a different facility of yours, and say you wanted them to be on the analysis, then they could be in here changing this with you real time. So that's just, you know, that's just getting down into the collaborative nature of where we're at today. And of course, if you have people that like these things go from left to right, top to bottom, it doesn't matter. The logic isn't any different. Okay, I better giddy up. I'm overstaying my welcome here. All right, let me go back here. There we go. All right. I left these in here because I knew that if you had the slide deck that you'd be able to see them in real time as opposed to me going out of program to do it. Okay, note where I didn't note it before, but how can got all the way to the human root, and when I got to the human, I switched my questioning to why. Why did that person choose to do that the way that they did? Okay. All right, now this is just saying I could go deeper here. You know, you take the stuff back to Adam and Eve if you want to, but my rule of thumb for where to stop is when the solution is obvious. You know, if I went back and I was looking at, well, who put this policy in there? I really don't care. You know, they may be retired, they may not be around anymore. It doesn't matter. It's not going to help me. If it goes outside the fence, I don't have any control of it. I don't really care. Okay. This is what I wanted to say here, is that if we had stopped and we had blamed this person, many of you have heard of the Swiss cheese model, where it just shows vulnerability in the defense mechanisms. You know, on this particular day, these four things queued up and they fed into the minds of this person, and they aligned in that way. Again, look at my hourglass. The human's in the middle, the consequences are above it, and then the reasoning is below it. Okay, I put this in here because I like the graphic, but it's nothing unusual that you're going to see in interviews. When you interview people in separate rooms after an incident's occurred, you're going to be wondering, were these people in the same room? Because their descriptions will be totally different. And that's why we have to deal with the facts of saying, you know, whose story is supported by physical evidence as opposed to just their perceptions. So these people aren't lying. Both of them are likely telling you the truth. It's just that we have to, they see it from different perspectives. All right, this is going to be one of the gifts that I give you. And this is one of the human error templates that's built into the tool I was showing you before. But when you get to the human part, this is like this block here, the personnel error diagnostic chart. Low alertness, high stress, high confusion, overconfidence is one that we deal with a lot, and low compliance. So when you sit here, the cause and effect is at every level. And I say, well, how could overconfidence lead to an improper decision? Underestimated the complexity of the task. Tunnel vision is you literally lose your peripheral vision when you are in a life-threatening situation, is that you are zeroed in what's in front of you and you can get blindsided. Shortcuts, whenever you're time pressured to do anything, you're likely to take shortcuts. And and that's a reiterative process. You keep doing that, and eventually you're going to fall into the danger zone, and you're going to have problems because you're going to have failures. Okay. And in the case that we had, what if we had stopped at the physical and we just replaced the bearing? Would the problem go away? Likely not. We would have just replaced it because we didn't get the roots down in that. What if we had just blamed that person and said that, you know, that's the way we do things here, is that, you know, they made a bad decision and I'm going to discipline them. Make the problem go away? Not likely. So if we get down into why and we fix all of those systems that help people make better decisions, then not only will that particular problem go away, but you are likely going to help or contribute towards other things not happening that likely would have happened. Systems are not made for one person. They're made for a multitude of people. Okay. All right. What if I had used the 5 whys? And we got it laid down sideways here. And this is just one rendition. But, you know, this is what I talk about when you say there's multiple paths to failure. But when I'm using this, I'm only going to have one. I'm only going to have one linear path. And this could have just resulted in alignment and blaming the person. Now, a lot of people will ask me why I lay it on its side. It's a lot harder to read right now, isn't it? So that's the reason that I laid it on the side, is so that I could go ahead and get the text so that people could read it. We're not going to be able to go through this, but I suspect that this will be in the materials that you get. This is an RCA on why RCA efforts fail. And if you hit that, it's a YouTube account over there. And I think that you should show it to your managements, to be quite honest with you. So, because it's not just a person who did it. It's not just the methodology that did it. There's unexpected expectations.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
We can definitely go over, just so you know, if anyone has to leave, they'll be able to catch the recording to see what's left at the end. So I don't want you to be rushing on our account. We have plenty of time.
Okay, we're coming around turn 4 now, so hang with me a few more minutes, and then it's going to be like Halloween, and you're going to get free stuff. Okay, so I went through all of this, and I'm going to say, what's the difference between root cause analysis and shallow cause analysis? There's the hourglass I've been talking about. Essentially, above that hourglass is what we call root cause failure analysis, because it deals with the mechanical or the electrical issues. We're asking how can. Beneath that, we're dealing with the whys. We said these were undesirable outcomes. These were the physics of failure. This is the utilization of deductive logic. And when we're dealing with reasoning, we switch to inductive logic. And again, another pet peeve of mine, you're doing RCA because you're interested in decision intent. You're not interested on decision outcome for the purposes of discipline. So in the one slide, after going through all of this, the difference to me between shallow cause analysis and root cause analysis is along this spectrum, where do we stop? If you stop short of understanding the systems, then I think that we're doing a shallow cause analysis, because there's more to be done. Okay, I'm going to leave with some funnies going on here. Is that this is applying RCA to miscommunications. Why my friend got fired. I had a friend in the software development field who was charged by his boss to organize the annual company outing. The instructions he was given concerning beverages was as follows. Due to economic conditions, we are having to cut back a bit this year. So we will only issue one drink ticket per person, and they will have to purchase more if they want more drinks. So this was his resolution. So with this, he did what he was told to do, but his resume is available. All right, let me see. I want to give a special shout out to our friends and sponsors today from the maintenance community, especially Caitlin for her fantastic job today. I've been dealing with Chelsea and of course Ryan, and my good friend Ricky Smith, who allowed me to participate unknowingly in his RCA session last week or earlier this week. And we are pre-election day. For those here in the US, please go out and vote. Doesn't matter which way you go, just go out and do your civic duty and vote. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try something. Let me bring up another document here. Just a second, Caitlin. Copy. Since I know that chat thing works now. You all have to work with me on this. That the software that I was using going through that is called Easy RCA. And what I want to do is give everybody a chance to use that if you want in the form of a trial. It's fully functional. The only thing you'll get on it is a watermark on your report. But I'm going to, instead of the 30 days, I'm going to give you all 60 days. But it's just that nobody in my office knows this yet. So the way that I'm going to have to do this is that if you choose to go ahead and create an account and with this link, after your name, just put TMC for the maintenance community, so that I'll know that anyone that comes in came from here, and I'll tell them to extend the 30-day thing to 60. After they will not be happy with me, but
but we're all very happy with you, so it evens out.
Okay, so the other thing I wanted to give you was that human error chart, which if you just go to my email here, that's in this picture right here, and just say send me free stuff or something like that, just put free stuff in there, and I'll know that I got to send you that link. It's not a link. I want to send you the actual file for that. So given that, I would take questions and answers for anybody who's chose to hang around.
Amazing. Just on behalf of everyone, so you know what everyone's saying in the chat, there's a lot of "this is amazing, we need a part 2, thank you so much." So for anyone who might have missed it, you have a few ways of getting your free stuff. You can email Bob with the email on your screen and in the chat right now for easy copy pasting. And make sure you add TMC in parentheses for the maintenance community. We'll also make sure when we send the recording out to you for coming live, we will put instructions in there too, so it's easy. And everyone, Bob is just saying, thank you so much. You are getting asked if you have any free hats with a wink.
Near and dear to my hats. That would be a little bit harder for me to distribute, but those are things that when we do our workshops, and those are obviously things when they graduate from our lead investigator classes or things like that. But I've been known to at in-person conferences be sold for beer.
Very giving with the hats. So one question we have is, how do you overcome subjective, like people who are being subjective or biased?
In the form of their evidence to prove or disprove something?
I believe so. Would love follow-up from Francisco if I'm guessing wrong, but yes, during the process, when you're doing your evidence and everything, how do you overcome being biased or subjective?
I think all of your team members, because there's a whole section we do on the balance of the team members. If you always have 4 maintenance people, it's always going to be operations fault. If you have operations people, it's always going to be maintenance fault. You get them 2 together and it's all the engineers. I think that there needs to be a proper balance where people will question the subjectivity of the response. And you have to be able, what you don't want to do is have that challenge when you're in your final meeting, because that's where if they perceive that hearsay is going to fly as fact, they'll start to doubt the rest of your analysis, even if it was that one time for the subjectivity. I just think that the subjectivity has to be backed up with hard evidence.
I'm just going through the rest of the questions. It's a lot of thank you so much, and this is amazing.
I'm gonna have to have them talk to my wife.
How do you overcome the defensive position of people being questioned?
What I've found with that is that as opposed to just talking with someone, if you go ahead and you use this logic tree kind of tool together, I think that it's non-personal and it's non-threatening, is because all you're doing is putting possibilities up and everybody's got to be able to prove it. So as long as somebody gets their block up there, we do this a lot with like customer complaint organizations, where they can actually use this tool and go with to their customers and they work it out together, because it's not always the OEM that's the problem. It is sometimes it's our fault. So if you have all of those things listed as just hypotheses, then it's just a matter of, where's the evidence to be able to back it up?
Amazing. Okay, from Hank. Is there a dollar safety and everyone's asking questions, so it's moving, sorry. Is there a dollar safety environmental impact threshold that a company should have to initiate an RCA?
And I'm trusting that that's Hank Kosovar.
Correct.
Yeah, and I didn't go through it in there because it wasn't a feature presentation, but I mean, that has to be one of the triggers. I asked about what were the triggers in your organization, and certainly that's going to be organization specific as to what their triggers are, which would say you have to do an RCA when this occurs. I just for me, that's RCA gets its, I think, first of all, root cause analysis is a useless term. It's because it's not properly defined. It's not universally accepted, not a single definition. And I'm in the business, but since there's no universal definition of it, no matter what anybody does, they're calling it RCA. It could be on a bar napkin, you know, as opposed to something like this. So, you know, I just think that we have to stick to the discipline of the steps and validate everything.
Excellent. No bar napkins here. Fabio asks, what is the best way to do an RCA for electrical failures when there is no real hard evidence?
Well, that, you know, and I know where he's coming from with that, and I'm not going to have a good answer. Is that because that's just like when you have an electrical problem and you go to the car dealership and it's not happening when you go there. They're intermittent, and if that was my case, and I don't know what the frequency would be in the issue that he's having, but if you know what it is, then there's probably ways you can put surveillance on top of that. That whether I don't know how it surfaces or manifests itself, but whether it's a surveillance camera or whether it's sensors that I can put on that would, you know, monitor it more closely. But I would certainly find out, however it's surfacing, how can I watch it more intently so that when it's happening, I can see it happening.
Perfect. And then what equipment is more difficult to apply an RCA on, rotary or static?
I don't think that it matters to me. It's just a matter of the availability of the evidence. You know, if somebody goes in there in good faith and they clean up the operation and all your evidence is in a dumpster, then you're going to be in the business of dumpster diving. Because whether it's rotary or not, it's a matter of how easily you're going to be able to get the data, the evidence.
Excellent.
In either case, a metallurgist is going to be your best friend. You don't have to be a metallurgist. You just have to know one.
I'm really grateful I've learned this word today, Bob. Metallurgist. So Jeff asks, I find human bias is the biggest barrier to effective problem solving. How do you manage this?
Well, I guess what you do is you manage it by being a counterweight to when you see the bias, you challenge it. Because I can guarantee you, whoever you're presenting that to, they're going to bring it up. If they see a bias in there, they're going to ask you how you know that, and you got to have a good answer. So I would say put that visualization in your mind that when you go, because to me, when you do your final presentation, it's like your day in court. So if you go up there and that you don't have anything to back up, you know, why you're making that claim or that conclusion, then it's going to really hurt the credibility of the rest of the analysis you did.
Excellent. Great. Okay, I think everyone is starting to say goodbye. So I think that's everything. If you have any follow-up questions, you can always ask Bob in the maintenance community Slack group. We're going to post this recording in the Watch Webinar Replays channel. And then feel free to follow up with any questions you might have there, and we will make sure to answer it. Bob, any other final things you'd like to say beyond, well, before you do, please, I just want to say thank you so much for today's time. It was so enlightening, and I'm so grateful for your time. So anything else you'd like to add?
No, just thank you for your team's support and all that you do for this whole community. It's greatly appreciated, and I will just depart with saying, vote tomorrow, vote, vote.
Excellent. And if you're watching this recording after Monday, you know, thanks for joining, and please join the Slack community to ask follow-up questions, and hopefully we'll have more events with Bob very soon. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks for choosing to watch.
Bye.